trauma fantasy. This genre has been wrapping itself around my mind, and it's been driving me crazy in all the right ways, thankfully. And it's gotten me thinking, what is trauma fantasy? I saw it first in something like Reanimal, a game that I had seen the commercials for and I knew very little about, but I knew that the creators of Little Nightmares had made it, or people who had worked on Little Nightmares had come and made it. And I have seen things about Little Nightmares, and I love watching the lore and the story of them. The trilogy has been incredibly fascinating. But Reanimal really engaged me. It really caught me off guard how much it began to swell around my life. But ever since I've watched the Let's Play of IGP, awesome YouTuber, go check him out. If you really like YouTubers who do Let's Plays but love getting into the lore of things, he's the guy to watch. And I loved him and his friend Skilly playing the game. It was fascinating to see the dynamic of Reanimal. But it got me thinking, because of its similarities to Little Nightmares, not just in gameplay, but also in themes, the monsters, the feeling, it got me thinking about one specific thing. What is this genre? It's not just fantasy, it's not just supernatural, it's not just sci-fi, and it's not just horror. It's diving into a conglomerate of genres, and I couldn't put my finger on it. It was bothering the heck out of me. But for the past couple of days, like I did with Dread Fantasy, I let it simmer for a bit, but then it hit me. And I found the stories that fit into it as well. Trauma fantasy. The stories that I came across were things like Little Nightmares, the trilogy, Reanimal, of course, By Sweet Carol, American McGee's Alice in Wonderland, both the original and the Xbox one that came out later on in the 2000s, the movie City of Lost Children, Limbo, Dark, Coraline, Neil Gaiman's book and the movie adaptation by Tim Burton, and the video game Inside. Most of them were video games, and I think that's just because, well, it's a interesting platform to allow people to experience this genre. A lot of people enjoy the horror and fantastical elements that video games can display. Therefore, I think that's why there's a lot of these video games in the genre. A lot of them have emerged over time. It was not a very popular genre, I imagine, in like the 80s or 70s or 60s. In like smaller groups for sure. And maybe there's examples I couldn't even find. But among these, I really felt like they were the greatest example for this. Trauma fantasy consists of a lot of different themes. Mainly on themes of things like fear, hopelessness, powerlessness, trauma itself, both literally, physically, metaphorically, and symbolically and spiritually. A lot of different ways. There's also themes of monsters, specifically adults being the monsters, children, lost children, in fact, kids being the main characters. It can be kids in their adolescence, early adolescence, all the way to them being just teenagers entering into adulthood. There's a lot of themes of the innocence being robbed from them, taken away, stripped from them, or murderly destroyed from their lives. These elements come into play, along with darker, twisted elements at times, but also hopeful, light-born elements. You see this in the colors, the cinematography, the design in levels, characters, etc. The stories themselves often have the characters hiding rather than fighting. Often they can fight in certain situations, like in Reanimal, and even in things like Coraline. However, it's a struggle to do so. Powers are limited against the forces at bay. And not every story is the same, right? By Sweet Carol, the video game, which was hand-drawn and beautifully made, it itself shows more of a detective work and running away and hiding, as not so much the fighting. But you can enlist the help of other characters along the way to help you be able to pursue your endeavors in finding your friend Carol and seeing what happened to her. With these stories, we find that it's often they're searching for something. The characters are finding some kind of hope and solace in the situations that are bleak and hopeless. These characters want to be able to find this hope in a dark, decrepit, falling world. And it's not always a world that's falling apart, but I mean, often the worlds themselves hold a dark side, if nothing else. Coraline and By Sweet Carol are this way, while in things like Alice in Wonderland, American McGee's version, Alice is fighting past her traumas, and this fantastical world that exists is mostly in her head, but there's kind of an idea that it might be real. So this genre does tap a little bit against the genre gateway fantasy, which I talked about in my video previously. And it also touches and nudges a little bit against wonder fiction, another genre, mainly because they all three focus on kids. It's kind of interesting. While trauma fantasy focuses on the fears, the more darker aspects of adolescence joining adulthood, and gateway fantasy is the escapism away from adulthood, wonder fiction tends to be the acceptance or the, well, loveliness of being in adolescence and allowing adulthood to take its place. And it transitions way better than the other two. But trauma fantasy isn't just about the trauma. It's also about the perilousness and the characters seeking to overcome them. Whether the characters defend themselves or not, whether the characters are hiding just drastically for survival, the feeling that comes from these stories is often the feeling against the child versus the monster. The monsters, funny enough, often take the form of adults or disformed evil abominations, because often not only has it been seen that children have a harder time grasping concepts and ideas, but also because adulthood is a frightening thing. It strips away the innocence. In a lot of ways, even in modern society, we see how it has stripped away the beauty and purity of children. And it reflects greatly in these stories. Even though the worlds they're traveling through are real, and they are their reality or the fantastical world they've entered into, they struggle to fight against creatures and monsters that represent different fears. In different elements, it's fears of the unknown, which is the ultimate fear, and all other fears extend from this. But it's fears of also strangers, people you don't know or understand, fears of broken love, fears of losing people and being the one you feel like was the cause of it, fears of terrible things you had done wrong, fears of things you don't understand, fears of death, fears of time, fears of powerlessness, fear of hunger, fear of all manner of things. And these stories reflect that. The monstrosities hide under sheep's clothing. In Little Nightmares and Reanimal, you see this often. Monsters are hiding under the skins of people. And in other aspects, monsters are what people became, or monsters are the forms or manifestations of the trauma itself. Something I wish some of these stories would do a little bit more is show a bit of the victory over it, but I think there is kind of a point showing sometimes the darker side is that sometimes it feels like you can't overcome trauma. Sometimes it feels like you can't overcome fear itself. One thing I'll say, a part of the message of this story, is I don't think all of these stories are saying that completely, though. I think it's often showing that children have a lot of power. They're the ones that see past the dark glass and are able to see more clearly. Meanwhile, adults are a bit blinded by self-endeavorments or by adult things that keep them busy and distracted. But the children in these stories are remarkable. Their persistence, resilience, their curiosity, and creativity show through just as much as the terror and darkness they fight. And I think, in essence, the monsters are scared of this. They're frightened by the children just as much as the children are frightened by the monsters. In most stories, and even in real life, this is the case. Monsters seek to destroy that which they hate, and children seek to free that which they love. You see this in the goals that they seek to accomplish in a lot of these stories, is that in things like Limbo, the main character is trying to save his sister. Coraline is trying to save her parents. Even in Reanimal, these children are trying to save each other. And in Little Nightmares, they're trying to protect one another and get themselves to a safer place. I love this genre because I think what it touches is that feeling of both the dark elements of life, but also the fascinating elements of psychology, blending it with the magic and innocence that we have in imagination. Imagination allows us to dive into a lot of pools, both the dark ones, the light ones, and everything in between. That's what's fun about stories and about imagination. The magic of it all allows us to be able to see these things, and in this case, be able to see monsters in such a way that they reflect our darkest thoughts, fears, and wishes. All in all, this is a story worth experiencing. And it definitely shows the silver lining hiding under the clouds. It gets you thinking, though, what if someone were to create a story in the genre, specifically based off of things like Alice in Wonderland, American McGee, Madness Returns, and Reanimal, and Little Nightmares? What if it was somebody who was the mysterious stranger? That's right, guys. I'm going to be working on a video coming out in a few weeks about working on a story based on this genre. And not just this genre, with direct inspiration from Reanimal and Little Nightmares, because it just really has impacted my thinking and storytelling. I have a lot of stories on the fire right now, but it'd be cool to show you kind of the process of how I work and create stories, while at the same time being able to work on it with you guys, get some input and some thoughts and details, and see where it goes. If you want to support this channel, please leave a comment down below. Likes and subscribes, everything and anything helps. As well, if you have any suggestions on how I can get some funding and support from you guys on how to create more of my stories, please leave a message down below in the comments down below, or even message me directly on the channel or on my Instagram, or my Facebook. I think there's a Facebook on the channel. I don't know. But love to get your feedback. Look for that video in the future. Please watch these videos if you really like this one. And as always, I'll see you on the other side of the gates.